This program is essentially meant to make it possible for each and everyone out there to be able to contribute from various parts of the globe to the discussion. Without wasting my time, our guest is already seated, and most of you might know him. He is a political activist and a leading and active member of the SMG movement of Ghana. So without wasting my time, I'd like to invite to the microphone Mr. Nanaya Apiakubi.
Good evening, comrades, and good evening to viewers of Pan-African TV and those who are also listening to us via the mediums which is being carried. I'm happy to be here to start the conversation, since this is not a monologue, and this is a program which essentially is a contribution by all of us in studio. My task is just to set the conversation, set the tone for the conversation, so that all of us can also make their inputs in order for all of us to collectively come to a common understanding of the state of our country. I don't think that I have a different experience with the state of the Ghanaian economy than many working people and many Ghanaians. And so we all have experiences to share. But in order for us to arrive or in dealing with this topic, I'd want us to go a little bit back into history about this discussion about Ghana, where we have come from and where we are 65 years on. And for purposes of this discussion, which is supposed to be brief, I just want to start by saying that the geographical area that we call Ghana today had contact with foreigners, and foreigners were here within this area for over 2 centuries. And they were here essentially based on their own development and the various contradictions in Europe that led them to reach out to other parts of the globe in search of solutions to the problems that were confronting them, which were economic, in search of solutions for raw materials to feed emerging industries, in search of territories to also even redeploy some of their citizens who then became colonial authorities in other areas, and in search also of markets, even for goods that surpluses that has been generated in this colonial metropolis. And so our encounter with the outside world was one that was characterized from the onset by exploitation. And exploitation, which is economic, was held down through political means by having the colonial administration which exercised political jurisdiction over our territory to ensure that their economic objective of extracting resources from here and also using us as a market for the surpluses that they generate, and that process connecting us within the global production order as rather a position which is one of exploitative. And so consequently, any such arrangement where there's an oppressor, where there's an exploitation, and there's one who is oppressed and exploited, is bound to lead to resistance and the quest for the people for emancipation. And for years, our forefathers, people struggled against this unjust system. This constant struggle by our forefathers to liberate themselves, to emancipate themselves from these arrangements is what ultimately culminated into the independence of what we call modern day Ghana under the exemplary leadership of the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah at the helm of the Ghanaian people for the independence that we had. And it is important to state that even towards the struggle for independence, of course, the nature of national liberation struggles is one that mobilizes everybody together for the common objective of kicking away the common enemy, who in our case was a colonial authority, brought together all kinds of forces. Although in terms of orientation and the aspiration of the kind of country that had to be constructed, there were differences. And clearly this manifested itself even in the methods that were adapted and the consequent Nkrumah's formation of the CPP and his departure from the UGCC, based on his aspiration and objective of building a people's movement for the liberation of the country and ultimately constructing a new society in which the aspirations of the masses of the people were met. And so we had independence fast forward, and Nkrumah's vision of the country which he wanted us to construct was one in which the resources of the country were harnessed for the benefit of the people. The full potential of every citizen of Ghana was to be deployed for the advancement of our society, and the need to also use Ghana's resources as part of the effort to decolonize Africa and to build a world in which there is no oppression and a world in which there's peace. And so Nkrumah's outlook on the kind of country we wanted to build at the inception of independence was radically different from those that in the process of national liberation there were fallout and what the UP element and so on thought that the country should be. Of course, their model was one which was inspired by, the Western formula of constructing a capitalist model in which private property was supposed to be the dominant mode of organizing society, and the market was supposed to reign supreme over all other aspects of our society. So I'm making this point to drum home the fact that the area we called Ghana and the people we call Ghana is not a homogeneous group, and people's orientations are informed by their outlook about how they see the world and what kind of society they think ought to be constructed. And you see this clearly in terms of what Nkrumah sought to do in the 2 5-year development plans and ultimately the 7-year development plan, which was to ensure that we delink our economy from the colonial metropolis, which was to ensure that the resources that we have, all the relevant linkages are created so that we'll be able to get a full benefit from our raw materials and to be able to develop them into finished goods. So this was one framework on one hand. Of course, the other class in society and those who thought that they had a natural, they were natural heirs to being leaders of the country or being president and so on, did not take it easy with Nkrumah. They thought that what was happening, which was largely in the interest of the people, was not the way to go. And again, in the processes of this struggle, backed by their foreign partners, the CIA and the Central Intelligence Agencies, together with their local agents, on 24th February 1966, overthrew the Nkrumah regime. And you could see from the NLC's model, which they used to replace the 7-year development plan, as a radically opposite approach to what Nkrumah has sought to do, which was people-centered, which was pro-poor, and which was the construction of a society in which production is organized in the interest of the people. So the 2-year development plan was essentially to open up the Ghanaian economy and to open us up for the dictates of Western metropolitan centers and Western financial institutions and so on. So we opened up, and I'm sure that many of us are aware of all that happened after 1966, and I wouldn't want to go into the details of the series of military junctures that we had. But I thought that the Nkrumah era was important in lifting up the different models of development and what exists within these alternatives, and how it is important to emphasize that different classes in society pursue, if they are in charge of the state machinery, pursue different programs in the interest of the class that they represent. And Nkrumah's projects clearly represent the working class aspirations and the interest of the majority of our country. So we had subsequent coup d'etats between 1966, and it is important to also single out the era of Acheampong, which had a few progressive actions, which is also worth lifting up. The introduction of ensuring that our stake, for example, in our mineral resources was substantial from what we had before. The introduction of public housing and so on, which was also in line a bit with ensuring that the masses of our people benefit from the resources of the country. But it's also important in discussing this, as I mentioned, that we cannot also discuss the country in isolation with its linkages with a global order. And so around the late 1980s, there was a global resurgence of an economic model which came to be known as neoliberalism, which chief proponents were the Reagan-Thatcher regime in the US and the UK. And this model essentially sought to ensure that, to roll back all gains that working people through their struggles have been able to accumulate for our country. And these neoliberal policies essentially sought to make the market the king. It sought to deregulate every aspect of our lives. It sought to ensure that privatization becomes the order of the day. It sought to ensure that the state is withdrawn from active participation in our national lives. And these policies from the 1980s, being championed by the IMF and the World Bank, has been the model that over the last 30 to 40 years has driven third world economics, and in our case, the Ghanaian economy, from the 1980s till today. And what essentially has been trumpeted all around is that the state has no business doing business, and that it is the private sector which is the engine of growth. And so even where we had state enterprises, they were auctioned under divestiture, and over 400 state enterprises were sold, none of which is actively running, as we have been told that the private sector does a better job at managing these institutions. Now, this economic model is what has held sway for the last 40 years, regardless of the political regime that has been in place. And we have seen consistently that these prescriptions, which in many cases, because of the economic arrangement we have, our engagement with the IMF and the World Bank and these Bretton Woods institutions has consistently, using tools such as debt and so on, held us to be abiding strictly by this framework within which we have all these policies, such as deregulating, such as policies such as privatization of state-owned enterprises, and all the kind of policies that we have seen from the 1980s. Now, the consequence of what we have seen since the 1980s under the banner of neoliberalism is what has now necessitated this conversation about where we are as a country. I think that over the last 2 weeks, the big conversation has been that we are a broke country, has been that our debt stock now is in excess of about 335 billion Ghana cedis. The big conversation now has been that we are living in a country in which the tax revenue that we are expecting from the 2022 budget is one that we are seeking to realize 100 billion, even with the inclusion of the e-levy. However, 3 line items: compensation, debt servicing, statutory payments, in order to be able to honor those, we need about 113 billion, which means we need to even borrow about 13 billion to be able to make up for these important payments. Now, even apart from that, we also need to borrow in excess of about 24 billion in order for us to be able to procure goods and services and to be able to be able to carry out capital expenditure, which are very crucial investments in assets that can regenerate capital and so on. So this has been the state of the economy. The state of the economy today is one in which, after over 40 years of going on this neoliberal experiment, we are not able to pay school feeding program caterers. After over 40 years of engaging on this paradigm, National Health Insurance Scheme is struggling, is in arrears for over 7 months, as we are being told. And in fact, we are being told that the cash and carry system has been reversed in many of our health institutions. After over 40 years of going on this experiment, we are seeing massive job losses, and we are seeing the growing unemployment within our metropolitan centers. Many people are leaving the countryside, the rural communities, into the urban centers in search of non-existent jobs. After these years of going by these prescriptions as given by these written rules institutions, we are seeing an increasing level of the cost of living in the country. Petroleum prices, food prices, everything is on the rise today. And it is important to highlight that this crisis, as we find ourselves, and the lack of direction from the political elite in terms of which way to turn, and in the quest for the masses of the people to find direction, resorting to back into ethnic and tribal framework in search of the solution, which is also leading to all these increased communal clashes and so on that we are having across the country, has led to a situation where many Ghanaians are asking what next for the future of our country. Many, in the confusion, are calling for all kinds of options. What we need to be asking ourselves in the midst of all this is that, how do we find a way out of this framework which clearly has not worked for us over the last 40 years? How do we find an alternative model which produces an outcome which resolves the problems of the masses of our country? How do we find alternative vehicles that can lead us into this different arrangement, clearly out of the framework that we are used to? And I think that the conversation, by and large, on many of the platforms is still boxed within the conversation about how do we tinker, how do we amend, how do we reform this moribund neoliberal framework, rather than finding an alternative to that framework in solving the problem of our people. It is important to highlight that we cannot assume that the state of development, indicators such as GDP and so on, which is frequently touted around as a symbol for the growth in the economy and so on, beneath it are lives of ordinary people, and what is the meaning of these indicators to the lives of the people. I think that this conversation would do us a lot of good if at the end we are able to arrive at a framework or a common consensus on an alternative model which will deliver the aspirations of the people, the countryside, the working people of our country, the women and the youth of our country, who are seriously looking for a way out of this crisis. And I think that this sets the tone for the conversations that we are supposed to have for the next 1 hour. So I'd like to pause here. I'd want us to interact. I'd like us to talk more about it, and then we can continue to share perspectives on this conversation. Thank you.
was an insightful piece of presentation from Mr. Apianana Yakubi. Without wasting my time, as we usually do, we'll be allotting some minutes to our studio audience and our wonderful viewers out there. If there's any comment, suggestion, a question you have to ask, there's the room. How many? So 1, 2, 3. So in that order, please. You next. Please, each and everyone has a minute and a half to execute his question. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a strong analysis and background you've given. So far as our economy is concerned, yes, indeed, you are broke. But it's important to know that Ghanaians must link our economic structure from the colonial resources. It comes in many forms. This is the time we need to bounce back. If I think about the price of kenke, if I visit communities and see shortage of water, we don't have the basic needs, we are lacking for basic needs, then there is small room for improvement. We need to bounce back. For wherever there is a will, there is a way. And how can we do that? We need to enjoy, this is the time for us to be planting, being our own manufacturers, we cease importations and rest our views. If you look at, I watched these statistics from Guta, talking about city depreciation and other stakeholders body. The city is rising, and due to the dollar market, you understand. Now we are buying dollar to CD about 7 CD plus, if I stand to be corrected. So you see, there are so many things we need to look at, checks and balance. Let me put this work there so that we can make sure we have a stable economy, because where it's going, if we don't take proper measures, it will do us more harm than good. So thank you very much for this presentation.
Good evening. You see, the reality of this country is we are broke. Why are we broke? Because we are not producing anything. We import, in fact, everything in this country. And our leaders, they have failed us. Seriously. Where are the one district, one factory? What are the importation? Because there is nothing happening in this country. Look, when you go to Tema, importation is so high. We are not producing nothing. And what do you expect? A country that does not produce anything, the country will be hard. In fact, we have a lot of things that we can produce. But we have selfish, greedy leaders who always think that importation is good because they will be getting there something. Look, I always say that go to Aveime, we have rice there. We have rice. We have Ghanaian rice. How many people eat Ghanaian rice in this country? Go to Mokola and see those rices over there. We are creating jobs for them. If we have our own and we can't buy our own, rather we like buying others. What do you think we are doing? Look, we need to get serious. Our leaders are not helping this country. They are not helping us at all. They are rather misusing our resources of this country. And we are still voting for them. Look, we have to be wise. 2024 is coming. They will be coming to us again with the same story. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think mine is a contribution or a suggestion that I want to make. Ghana at 65. Today I was in a newsroom and I was just going through my mind. I was like, Ghana at 65. I think we need to have some dialogue. And what we need to do is a review of the constitution, especially in the appointment of various head of institutions. Looking at the judiciary is appointed by the president. The police service is also appointed by the president, that is the IGP, and then most of the key position holders. And so it makes it difficult for the country to move forward when such people are being probably controlled by the president, because they have to be independent and have they themselves electing their various head of institution. And so in so doing, that will be able to let's say, do the checks and balance in ensuring productivity and let's say, interference in their kind of their discharge of duties. Because I realize that when these people are being appointed by the president or the politicians manipulate them, and then we are unable to move forward as a country. So we are where we are today because the constitution has made it in such a way that some people are being manipulated by the politicians so that we are able to move forward. So fast forward, to be able to go far in this country and see massive development, the various institutions in this country must be independent, solely independent, the judicial system and all that. We can see what is going on today, even at the High Court today, or the Supreme Court today, sorry. The Parliament, which has to do with the second Deputy Speaker, or the first Deputy Speaker, and then that on the basis that he cannot vote whilst he's presiding. And then they are also challenging the fact that since he represents a constituency, he can still vote. But they have the standing orders in Parliament which says that when you are presiding, you cannot cast a vote. Today, look at what we are seeing today. I don't want to sound contempt, but I think the way the ruling went is going to hurt the future occurrence, because somebody wants to do something just to favor them to be to what? To have something passed. That is the e-levy as we are talking about. So when we have all these institutions being independent, I don't think that politicians will have influence. So we will be able to be productive to this country and then see a massive development of this country. And to see that that's really the problem, where we have the various head of institutions being appointed by the politicians. And that's my contribution I want to make so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Comrade Nanayao. I think I have just 1 minute, a quick one, and I'll try to summarize whatever I want to say within that 1 minute. First of all, I'm not an economist, and I might not qualify to analyze some of these things, but I don't think I need to be an economist to decipher what common sense can give me. If I have my economy being run over 4 to 5 decades, or well over 500 years by somebody who hands it over to me, and then I go back to the person and say, prescribe for me the best way forward. I think I don't need to be an economist to know that that doesn't make sense. Yet we have run to the IMF and World Bank since time immemorial, and they have prescribed for us what they think are the best ways forward to keep our economy in check, and to take us to the promised land. Now check this out. Somebody prescribes for you what you are supposed to do. He monitors you to make sure it is done. He evaluates you to make sure that the right thing is done. At the end of the day, he tells you have failed. There's a problem. So when I hear people say, okay, we don't want e-levy. Yes, we don't want e-levy, but going to the IMF and World Bank is certainly not the way forward, because they have misled us. In fact, they've misled any other person that have been to those places. Now you sit back and ask yourself, independence, 65 years today, what do we own as a country, as a continent? What do we contribute to? What do we produce? What do we distribute? We don't distribute anything. We don't produce anything. As a matter of fact, we don't own anything because we've mortgaged everything out to these people. So yes, we need to, as most people are putting the conversation out there, we need to sit on the table and look at homegrown policies on the way forward and detach ourselves from these colonial metropolis that are dictating to us and then sending us in the wrong direction. Thank you very much.
Good evening, fellow viewers. 65 years on, and Ghana is now a completely failed state. I think gone were the days when, after independence, we had the Farmers Brigade, the Workers Brigade, Farmers Brigade, the Builders Brigade. All the institutions are seriously working. We know the political institutions are working, the health institutions, the educational institutions, we're all working. Right now, if you go to the educational institution, you don't know what they do. They don't produce the right food to occupy the right place. So, of course, we are a failed state. But what I'm saying now is that the country leaders have got the right. The national leaders have the right to choose what to produce, to whom it should be given, and what to be done. But when we give ourselves to the colonialists still to dictate for us, I don't think we shall go anywhere. So people, wise up. Thank you very much.
Good evening, comrades. And then greetings to our cherished viewers out there too on social media. My contribution has to do with the understanding of what the Ghana state, the state of the economy, of the Ghanaian economy is. I think I chanced on the discussion online, that was yesterday, where people were analyzing our 2 years lockdown. The 2 years during which COVID hit, and then the importation reduced and all that. And then it was analyzed that during those 2 year period, Ghana depreciation, actually the cedi appreciated with some particular percentages. I don't quite remember how much. But then outside, when the world opened back on again, and then the depreciation started increasing again, the cedi started depreciating again. So it got people now asking the question, what happened during the lockdown? We were no longer importing. I mean, the government were forced to start producing face masks in Ghana, and then we reduced importation. But then the cedi appreciated. We might not have the true conclusion for that matter, but those are some of the discussions that I hold. And then the other thing is, we don't have to be an economist, like my comrade also said, to be able to understand what is happening. I mean, my sister is in UDS in Yankpala. Every day in, day out, what she complains about is water. They don't have access to water. No potable water, drinking water. She has to depend on buying sachet water now, which is also 2 for 50 pesos. Sachet water is 2 for 50 pesos. Petrol has broken the heat. Dollar keeps rising. Everything you want to do now is ×2. So even my brother, who asks a comfortable job, is now thinking about buying a bicycle to ride to work, because it's basically not that far from his apartment, that he has to spend so much on petrol before he can get to work and come back. So this is the Ghanaian state of the Ghanaian economy, and it is time everybody realize that the way we are governing the country over the last few decades, or a lot of decades since the overthrow of the Osajifo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's governance, it has been on the reverse track, and we keep retrogressing. But then all these leaders with their big books come back and give us the lies, and then we consume it, and then we go back and vote for them. So it's time we rise up. Thank you.
Well, we would like to once again invite the guest for today, Mr. Anaya Apiakubi, to give his closing remarks and address the comments that have been asked. I don't know if there are any social media interactions so far. So we will invite Mr. Nanaya Apiakubi to give his closing remarks and address the questions that have been asked.
Well, I think that all of us are living within the economy we are discussing. And I'm not surprised that each and everyone has shared perspectives that drum home the point that we are in a crisis. Most of the comments that came were contributions to hammer the points that were being made. But for a proposal that I would want for us to have a second look at, I think one of our comrades made a point about the solution to the crisis being constitutional review, and the need for us, the fact that the appointing authorities have too much influence over the heads of institutions. I think that usually these conversations, when we have it, we are boxed within the same frame. What is the 1992 Constitution? And whose interest does the 1992 Constitution serve? It is clear that yes, there are gains we made through our democratic experiment in allowing and creating the room and space for us to be able to organize ourselves within a certain free, liberated arrangement. But we cannot say that the kind of democracy we are enjoying from 1992 by the 1992 Constitution is a people's democracy. The democracy we have is one that has largely been a facade to protect the economic interest of the ruling class. It is one that has created the framework within which the economic arrangement which gives them the actual power is protected. It is one that the role of the state, which is essentially to ensure that whenever the masses of the people, whenever the ordinary people want to challenge the status quo, there are legal arrangements to ensure that they are disciplined using the coercive arm of government, using the legal institutions like parliament and so on, to ensure the continuous dominance of the state. That really has been the function of the democratic instruments and so on that we've had since 1992. And so this crisis, though we are trying to find a way out, really is not one that we should be looking at reforming the arrangements that continues to keep the ruling elites in there. It is one that we should be discussing what are the popular options available. How best do we organize our society in which if the cocoa farmer has an issue with a millionaire in the country, he's convinced that there will be justice. It is one that when we are talking about democracy, it is not about 4 years going to the ballot to vote, but it is one that there will be democracy when we are discussing how we organize production and in whose interest that economic arrangement should serve. So it is important for us to look beyond the narrow definitions of what democracy is within this Fourth Republic experiment and to begin to question that who should benefit from this democracy and why should democracy only be restricted to every 4 years electoral cycle and queuing to go and vote rather than it's permeating through every aspect of our lives. I think that is also important for us, and Haq brought the point about how we look within to develop things, which is part of the modes of ensuring that our currency is strong and so on. And he cited what happens to COVID and how we were able to look internally to be able to build our own country and use our own resources to solve our problems. I mean, today, I chanced on some statistics that is telling me and telling us that when it comes to gold production, the foreign stake, the control by foreign multinational corporations in the gold mining sector is about 98%. When you look at the oil and gas sector, the foreign dominance in that sector is about 87%. When you look at the banking and insurance sector, it's about 95% foreign control. When you look at the telecommunications, about 92% foreign control. The construction sector is about 67% foreign control. Now, if you have a country in which, even when we are discussing the private sector being an engine of growth, it is not about domestic private sector, but it's about foreign private sector, where, I mean, we heard the president when he was talking in Dubai, he says that Ghana is the go-to destination for foreign direct investment, and that this is a place where you get all the incentives you need if you bring your money here. What does that really mean? That means you bring your money here, you get tax holidays, you get all the incentives to be able to produce, you bring your machinery and all the things you need to produce, you don't pay duty and so on. That is the model they see. So in discussing how we have gotten here, we cannot lose sight of the fact that we have a ruling elite whose role has essentially been the comprador. That is playing the role of standing in for the foreign multinational corporations and getting the crumbs from what they are able to export out of our economy. And that has been the bane of the country. How do we get out of this? We need to get out of this with having an alternative arrangement. Of course, that alternative arrangement can only come about when we have an organization clear in articulating how we need to be able to take control over our resources and exploit it for the benefit of our people. We need to be clear in ensuring that we do not only remain just primary exporters of what we produce, but we are able to build structures that will be able to add value to what we generate in the country. Again, within the neoliberal framework, what is being trumpeted is free trade. Now you have a government that on one hand promotes free trade, and then on another hand is saying he's doing industrialization project. So you have a Kumfi juice competing aggressively with Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola is getting all the incentives and it has to fight with the Kumfi juice. So there's a disconnect in terms of even the policy coherence on what we do and how we use all the instruments available to us to be able to, one, build what we need to build as a people, which is the only guarantee, because it is only through the production process that jobs are created, that people become human beings, identify who they are, ideas are generated, and then the society that they want to form, because they know they are direct beneficiaries of what they produce, a better society is constructed on top of it. So my conclusion is that we are in crisis, like all of us have said. We are in crisis, but we can get out of the crisis. And we can get out of the crisis not through the reforms that are being put forward by our ruling elites in trying to create space again for them to be able to amass as they've been doing over the last decades. But there's hope if the working people of this country begin to question and begin to come together and begin to figure out how we can be able to work collectively to be able to address our common problems, how we can be creative in working in collectives to be able to figure out the problems that confront us and building the linkages not only with us, because the country is not an island. The country operates within a global framework, and the conditions of the working people of Ghana is no different from the working conditions of workers of Nigeria, of the workers of the USA, of the workers of South Africa. And so even as Ghanaian workers and working people and people who are suffering from this capitalist exploitation and the neoliberal framework, we should be also creating platforms that gives us linkages to working people globally in order for us to be able to think of a better alternative, which in my view is a socialist alternative in which production is organized and a better form of distribution which benefits the people who engage in the production, and they then become the masters of their destiny. I think that that continental project, that global project of working people coming together to crush the system that keeps them in perpetual subjugation is what needs to happen. And I think that is the way out. We don't need to be working in silos. We need to struggle home, but keeping an eye that the struggle is not local, but the struggle is also global, and build the linkages with other working people who are struggling wherever they find themselves. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Comrade Nana Apiakubi. I've been told there are comments from our social media handles, and I invite Mr. Hack to read them to us. Please, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
I'll start from the Facebook comments, and this is coming from Caesar from Gua, and he says, please, my question is, what happened to all the money we have mobilized from the international bond market? I thought it was to be used to soar up our economy, and when we say we are broke, I don't understand at all, because I can't see any economy investment. Okay. And we have another message from Lillian Bidiako, and he says, why didn't this ruling come when Reverend Mike was the Speaker of Parliament, and why have they stopped? Okay. So we have another one from Suleiman Abdurrahim. He says, common Gari, this our economists cannot even help to reduce the price for us. What kind of economists do we have in this country? Okay, and then we have Abdul saying he's watching live from Tamale. Another message coming from Pius Royal. It says, Neo-colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. I think that's an important book for everybody to read. Okay, we have message from Dinah Wood, who says, thank you, comrade, for this astute presentation. My question is, how can we salvage the country of all the economic challenges it's facing today? Are there alternatives? I think Comrade Nanaya enumerates the alternative for us already. Okay, and then Raymond Abiu, sorry if I got the name wrong. He says those who are siphoning the money from the system must bring back the stolen billions to develop the country. Okay, and then we have Malungu Watson. He says he's following the conversation from Zambia. Thank you for watching us. Okay, and no name. He says Ghana is dead. Our economy is broke. How do we move forward? Okay, I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hack. I'm told tomorrow the ladies wing of the SMG have a program which will be held at the SMG headquarters. That's around the Nogahe Hotel. Okay, so and all too well, I think we are bringing our program to a successful end today. I'd like to thank our studio audience and our cherished viewers out there for making it a success. Those who were able to come, those who watched us live. We thank you and we appreciate your presence. And this coming on behalf of our producer, Makiza Latifa. On this note, it's a goodbye to meet again same time next week. Bye.